From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin in Cuba, where a tornado has hit the capital on Sunday night, leaving at least 3 dead and the city of Havana without electricity. Officials say there are up to 178 injured. The tornado hit during an extratropical storm. Images from Cuba Debate show damaged cars and buildings, and most of the capital is currently in the dark due to strong winds and rain. The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, has been visiting affected sites across the island. In a tweet, he mourned the loss of life and said the damage from the storm is severe. Now to Brazil, the death toll from Friday's dam collapse has risen to 58, while 300 people remain missing. The site is owned by the Brazilian mining company Vale. Nearly 200 people have been rescued near the Brumadinho site in the state of Minas Gerais, but hopes of finding more survivors are fading. Amidst the scenes of devastation, family members are desperate for news of loved ones.
We've been out of contact with him for 12 to 14 hours when my sister spoke to him. After that, there has been no more contact and no information is being passed on. We have already looked in hospitals, we've already been to the morgue. Vale is not passing information, unfortunately. We see life as worth much more than Vale.
And the waste has reached the Brazilian river of Paraopeba. Consequences of the disaster could affect 19 municipalities. Water access for up to 1 million people could also be affected. The rupture of the dam has occurred less than 3 years after an environmental crime in Mariana, also in the state of Minas Gerais. That disaster released around 62 million cubic meters of mining waste into the region and killed 19. Vale was part owner of the company responsible, Samarco. Some fear that mining companies will continue to operate with impunity since Brazilian courts rule on the side of companies, creating opportunities for further tragedies.
They have a 10-meter dam project and are going to approve work on top of the dam. And this dam is 100 meters from here. It'll fall, they know it. But they are worried about the shareholders who are living on the Miami beachfront. They are not worried about our simple folk who are dying here. This is what is happening.
In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro has rejected the ultimatum made by some European countries to call elections within 8 days. In an interview with CNN Turk in Caracas, he also said U.S. President Donald Trump has not responded to his repeated calls for dialogue.
Europe has an insolent position, unsustainable, unpresentable, and it should withdraw its ultimatum. No one gives us ultimatums. If they want to leave Venezuela, they should all go. And now, Venezuela will continue its path. Fortunately, we do not depend on Europe and those arrogant, overbearing attitudes looking down on us because we are Latin Americans. They think we are inferior to them. That European elite is finished with. That European elites don't represent the European people. We have great friends in Europe and we have great solidarity movements in Europe. The leaders of Europe are sycophants, kneeling behind the policies of Donald Trump. All of Europe is kneeling at the feet of US President Donald Trump. It's as simple as that, and especially over Venezuela. I think it's implorable, though not impossible. I've sent many messages to Mr. Trump, but I think he's drowning in domestic problems, and I think that he looks down on us. He looks down on all of Latin America and the Caribbean. I think he looks down on the world. He thinks the world is inferior to the United States.
On Sunday, President Maduro participated in military drills with the army at the Paramacay fort. The head of the armed forces, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, and other senior officials were at his side. He said the troops are ready to defend the country. Venezuela is preparing for its largest ever military exercises, and it will be held on February 10.
We are preparing for the most important military exercises in 200 years of history. The most important because we are going to set the tone for our armed systems, all the military forces, operational readiness, all the military civic union, and the militia capacity, so that no one even dares to think about touching our sacred ground. Venezuela wants peace. Venezuela needs peace. And to guarantee peace, we have to prepare ourselves. Nobody respects the weak, the cowards, the traitors. Nobody. In this world, the brave and the courageous are respected. Power is respected. And we have to enforce the power of the Venezuelan army with military power. The military power of the nation. The United States Empire attacks our army, our armed forces. From Colombia, they conspire to divide our armed forces, sending thousands of messages on WhatsApp social networks every day so as to try to test morality, hoping for betrayal. Today, I have come to say that our Bolivarian national armed forces are increasingly closer to the people, every day more loyal to the revolution, more loyal to the homeland, more loyal to the Constitution.
And on Saturday, Venezuelans came out in large numbers to support President Nicolás Maduro. Their rally began in several streets in Caracas, and they made their way to the Miraflores presidential palace.
Venezuelans at the rally in Caracas made it very clear that they reject any possibility of violence and support a peaceful resolution through dialogue.
We support peace 100%. We are against everything the opposition is doing. They are very disrespectful to our president. They do not need to be a genius to understand that what they are doing is against the Constitution.
Venezuelans marched towards the presidential palace. They said the countries that support the opposition are following orders from the United States.
We are against the US and other countries interfering in our affairs. As Venezuelan citizens, we know that Venezuela is free and independent.
They took the opportunity to send messages to the President Nicolás Maduro.
We support the president and we are against terrorists who act violently in our country. We also reject the person who says he is the interim president. Our constitution does not allow that.
Waving national flags and chanting patriotically, the people of Caracas say they will keep supporting the Bolivarian Revolution and its leaders.
In other news, the United Nations Security Council has held an emergency meeting Saturday to discuss the situation in Venezuela. Of the 15 members of the Security Council, 4 voted against the emergency session, which was called by the United States after it recognized the country's opposition leader as interim president. 9 agreed to hold the meeting, while 2 member states abstained.
The Security Council.
Russia and China were at the forefront of the calls against foreign meddling in Venezuela.
The Russian Federation cannot support the attempts by our American colleagues to conduct a discussion of the situation in Venezuela. And in fact, introducing in our agenda issues formulated in this way, this is a gross abuse of the prerogatives of the members of the Security Council, especially in particular the permanent members. The internal situation in this Latin American country is not an item on the agenda of our council. We don't see any external threats coming from what is taking place in Venezuela. Venezuela does not represent a threat to peace and security. If anything does represent a threat to peace, it is the shameless and aggressive actions of the United States and their allies aimed at the ouster of the legitimately elected president of Venezuela.
Supports the efforts made by the Venezuelan government to uphold national sovereignty, independence, and stability. China maintains that all countries should abide by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter especially the norms governing international relations and the principles of international law, such as non-interference in each other's internal affairs.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back. Welcome back. Opposition groups in Honduras protested Sunday demanding the resignation of President Juan Orlando Hernández. Our correspondent in Tegucigalpa, Hilda Silvestrucci, explains.
La jornada de protestas pacíficas.
The day of peaceful protest called by the Liberty and Refoundation Party was met in some places by incidents of repression by the police and military. In this area where former President Jose Manuel Zelaya Rosales just arrived, the police launched tear gas, forcing the crowd to disperse along with Zelaya Rosales. Up until now, there have been some points in the capital and the rest of the country that have been occupied, but they were quickly displaced.
That was Hilda Silvestrucci from Tegucigalpa. Bolivian President Evo Morales will be able to run for a fourth term after winning his party's primaries on Sunday. Thousands of polling stations were open for around 2 million voters in these first primary elections to be held in the country. Residents elected candidates from 9 political parties. The chosen candidates will run for the presidential elections in October 2019.
Bolivia is
experiencing historic moments. This time, we are expanding not only Bolivian democracy, but the democratization of Bolivia's parties and political movements is starting. It is going further.
As a member of the Mass Party, I'm choosing Evo Morales so that he continues being president, because he is the only one and the best.
I am here to support my presidential candidates from MAS, the Movement for Socialism, to support them more than anything. Today we're completing a democratic process, so I have come here to cast my vote.
Let's hear from our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, who has details.
Bolivia realizó con éxito las primeras elecciones.
Bolivia has successfully celebrated its first primary elections, which have allowed political party members to participate in the process of electing their candidates for president and vice president across 9 political parties. After the candidates are chosen, they will participate in the presidential elections in October 2019. The day was calm and supervised by 20 experts in electoral processes, as well as observatory missions sent by the Organization of American States and other international groups. 1,700,000 members of the 9 parties participated in the primary elections. The opposition called on their supporters not to vote, whilst the ruling party and Supreme Court called for members to cast their ballots. The opposition said that these primaries are being held to consolidate Evo Morales for the next presidential elections. They also criticized the fact that each of the 9 political parties only presented one candidate. The elections were considered a success due to high participation.
That was Freddy Morales from Bolivia. And the electoral campaign for the presidential elections in El Salvador closed on Sunday. Thousands of supporters attended the closing campaign of the FMLN in San Salvador. The party's presidential candidate, Hugo Martinez, addressed the crowd and asked for their support. The right-wing Arena Party and the Ghana Party also campaign. The elections are set for Sunday, February 3rd. The funeral for the migrant boy who died in U.S. custody has been held in Guatemala. People gathered to pay their tributes to the 8-year-old boy. His body was repatriated from the United States on Friday night. He died due to flu while in U.S. custody in December. He was traveling with his father, who was trying to achieve asylum in the United States.
When one wants to progress and provide for a better future, you end up taking a step back. One needs to risk their life and that of their children as parents. This is a lesson, but there are still parents who risk the lives of their children so as to have a better life, for a better future for their children and their family.
It was something like negligence, they said. They did not rule it out properly, that the boy had the flu. They did not carry out the test properly. The guilty ones are the doctors, because even though he was a migrant, they must have given importance to the situation to avoid getting to this. If they had given him the medical treatment, I think the death of the child would have been avoided.
Now to Spain. Hundreds of taxis blocked one of Madrid's main roads on Monday morning as protests against online ride-hailing companies continue. The taxi drivers have been striking against services like Uber and Cabify since last Monday. The protesters say regulations are being ignored and that the competition is unfair. We're taking one last break. Stay with us.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Worldwide protests erupted over the weekend in support of Venezuelan sovereignty. In the Canadian city of Vancouver, demonstrators expressed their support for President Nicolas Maduro. They also condemned foreign intervention in the Latin American country.
For Canada, calling for no intervention and the self-determination for Venezuela. We are all with Maduro.
In solidarity with the democratically elected government of Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro, as well as renouncing any of Canada's actions against Venezuela, including the coup that is unfolding right now. And we will continue to stand in solidarity with the Venezuelan people. Viva Venezuela! Viva!
On Sunday, citizens in Montreal demonstrated in the snow. They marched through downtown chanting "Yankee no, Maduro yes." They denounced a coup attempt by Canada, the United States, and the European Union with the support of reactionary governments in the region. A rally was also held in Miami, Florida, outside of the offices of the corporate news network Univision. Demonstrators reject the hostile U.S. policies towards Venezuela and the biased coverage of the events by the channel. South Africa has also expressed concern at attempts to enact unconstitutional changes in Venezuela. Our correspondent in Pretoria, Matuba Matlaji, has more.
South African ambassador to the United Nations has received a mandate from government, and that mandate is to express support for Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. South Africa's position differs with the United States, Canada, and several other South American countries, but South Africa says it is not prepared to support any government that is formed outside an electoral process, and South Africa has been consistent on this matter, including with neighboring Zimbabwe. So the Minister of International Relations here in South Africa, Lindiwe Sisulu, said the country's vote at the United Nations would be reviewed depending on whether there is a humanitarian crisis reported in Venezuela. Now, South Africa's position comes amid weekend reports, or reports that have emerged at the weekend, stating that several European powers have warned Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to announce new election, or he must call elections within 8 days, or they will officially recognize the opposition's claim of leadership in that country. So this is surely going to be a story that develops throughout this week. It's back to you.
Thank you, Matuba Matlaje from Pretoria. And while the LGBTI community is protected by South Africa's constitution, the reality for many is quite different. Many still have a hard time finding employment, and they often face exclusion.
So my name is Ditseho. Yes, very lazy parents. My name is my surname. People always think I made a mistake, but it is my name is my surname. And I am a journalist by profession. I am a PhD candidate. And I'm also a transgender woman and activist. And my pronouns are she and her.
While decorated with university degrees, Ditseho says her identity as a transgender woman makes it almost impossible to land a good job.
A lot of transgender women end up as sex workers because we find it hard to find jobs, because employers don't know what to do with us. And we are a very qualified people. I know a lot of transgender graduates, but when you go for an interview, bosses almost see you as a minefield. They don't know how to deal with you. They don't know what to call you. They don't know how to step. They walk around eggshells around you. They literally see you as a lawsuit waiting to happen, because they feel like, I know myself, I will say the wrong thing, I will misgender her or use the wrong pronoun, and she'll sue us, you know.
She says transgender people are forced to become activists in South Africa because of the ignorance that prevails. Many well-known people in the country have come out as either members or supporters of the LGBTI community. Some have even written about it, but society remains conservative.
People demand you to explain, you know, heterosexual people, I call it heterosexual privilege, straight privilege, where people feel that because I'm straight, I'm right, and because you're not straight, you're somehow wrong. And sometimes it's not even, so they feel like they deserve an explanation. And I found myself in situations like that, and I find that a bit unfair, because, you know, when people want information about, I don't know, a soccer game or an album, or they want lyrics to a song, they don't hesitate to go on the net. But, you know, with things like this, they feel like, I'm not going to go on the net, you are going to explain it to me. If you've just joined us, welcome to it. You're listening to The Gay Agenda with me.
Many African countries still use the colonial anti-gay laws to suppress expression or dialogue about sexuality and gender identity. South Africa, with its progressive constitution, still has a society that won't accept people like Ditseho. Now the question remains, what is their recourse? Matuba Matlaje, Telesur, Pretoria.
Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir has blamed the media for exaggerating the crisis in the country, even as nationwide protests continue. During his visit to Egypt on Sunday, al-Bashir said there are problems in his country, but not to the extent of being reported. However, Sudan has been rocked by protests since December 19, after the government tripled the price of bread. Officials say 30 people have died in the violence.
There is a problem. We are not claiming that there is not, but it's not in the size or extent raised in some media. It is an attempt to clone the Arab Spring in Sudan.
A double bomb attack on a church in the Philippines has left 20 people dead. It happened Sunday at a Catholic church on a southern island as a mass was being celebrated. The Islamic State group has claimed the attacks, which came just days after voters backed expanded Muslim self-rule in the region. International superstar Oliver Tukutsi, a jazz musician from Zimbabwe, has been buried in his hometown. The artist, known as the father of South African jazz, died last Wednesday due to diabetes at the age of 66. Thousands of people attended his funeral carrying posters with his pictures. President Emerson Mnangagwa hailed him as a national hero on Thursday.
He was somebody well-known in Africa, the world at large, through his music. And it is a great loss, not only to the people of Zimbabwe, but the whole world at large.
We've lost a giant of African music, a humanist, an Africanist, a proud man. And so it's a sad time, but I think we've got to find joy and solace in the fact that his music lives on.
South African scientists have established a sperm bank for African penguins as part of a new study into the reproductive biology of this endangered species. African penguins are the only penguin species listed as endangered, with just some 50,000 breeding pairs left, down from 5 million 20 years ago. They are facing the threat of extinction.
With this species only found in Africa, you don't see other types of African penguins along the other countries. But people come here just to see that African penguin. If they aren't here within the next 10 years, there's nothing for them to come to South Africa for, and this is what makes it special. So with us having this sperm collection and in vitro, this could potentially bring up a lot more for our future, especially making sure that generations to come can see a penguin species on our coastline.
An important conservation work in Africa. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're on social media as well, so go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.